There are people out there who will tell you that markets are driven by logic and reason. Those people are partly correct, because obviously, if something happens that's really bad in the world, that's going to affect the global market. It's logic. But why does it affect the global market? Well, the main reason is emotion. Have you ever heard of fear of missing out? I've spoken about it before on the channel. It's called FOMO. Have you ever heard of panic buying? Look at what happened at the start of COVID when everyone started picking up everything they could. Emotion drives markets. People are totally fueled by how they feel, and all logic and reason goes out of the window. Why am I saying all this? Well, it's because this #NoPurchasing movement is a perfect example as to why emotion is something that's super important to consider when you're making huge, drastic changes to an economic model that you have set up. And I'm looking at you, DH Games, because you've screwed your economic model in the Gucci. So today we're going to go and talk about various things to do with this #NoSpending and hopefully shed some light into some economic reasons as to why DH Games are making some pretty severe mistakes when it comes to their player base and understanding how their community will and have responded to this change. So let's get cracking. You may have heard the argument that the reason the prices have changed in the game is to better represent the global market. This is true. If I look at my $99.99 package, that now costs me $99.99 British pounds. And although really $99.99 is at the moment around £84-85, when you factor in 20% tax that has to be added in before you actually see the written price, that results in the price being pushed up to $99.99. Those of you that live in America will click on a value package and then that tax is added afterwards, depending on what state you live in. So even though my package says $99.99 in pounds, I will pay exactly that price. In America, your price can change depending on what your state laws are for added tax on purchases. So straight up, it makes total sense, logically, as to why DH Games have risen their prices. The prices now better represent the global market. But here's some counter arguments that I need you guys to think about before you just let logic and reason sully your mind. Currently, the world economy is in a position where the US dollar, compared to other currencies, is stronger than it has been in years. Genuinely, I have not seen, in my time as an adult, my Great British pounds be worth so few dollars. As a person who gets paid in US dollars, this is brilliant because it means I get more British pounds. Because even though the dollar is doing better, my cost of living in the UK hasn't changed. So it just means I get more pounds for my dollars and things that I could otherwise buy are still the same price. So I just have more pounds to play with. This is great. That's called localized economy. How the dollar is performing isn't on a grand scheme affecting my cost of living. Sure, though, things have increased, like fuel, like electricity. Things that are affected by global markets, markets that typically do trade in US dollars, have 100% been affected by this. So for many who depend on globalized markets, their cost of living will absolutely have increased. So they may not feel this increase if they're paid in US dollars. In fact, if you're paid in your local currency and your local economy is affected by the US dollar, then you're not going to see a pay rise because your currency is just doing as, you know, you get paid in your currency, but everything becomes more expensive because it's all valued in US dollars. That's exactly what has happened to so many people when you look at the price changes in Idle Heroes. The developers have readjusted their prices to better represent the US dollar, but the people who are actually the ones purchasing these things haven't seen an equal pay rise. In fact, for a lot of people, their money is actually not taking them as far as it used to because their cost of living has increased. Now, how is that going to affect the individual emotionally? If you see that the cost of Idle Heroes has increased and your income has not, are you going to keep buying things? No, you're probably not, unless you're addicted and hooked on the game. There are people who very easily needed this price increase to cut them from the game entirely. It's a terrible marketing strategy. If you go take a look at what other companies have done, Twitch, for example, realized that localized economy and global economy are two completely different things, and therefore adjusted the price of subscriptions on Twitch to better represent individuals' local economy. So in one country, it could cost you $3 for a subscription. In another, it could cost you $5, because relative to their average income and their average cost of living, $3 gets you just as far as $5 in the US. And that made it much more approachable for people to spend and actually resulted in an increase in people subscribing and engaging with content on Twitch. This was a great move because it meant people from poorer countries with a lower average income could still get to spend on the things they enjoy because Twitch made their prices viable within that country's economic climate. That is something DH Games haven't done. DH Games have made everything a flat price in US dollars, and if your country's economic climate is bad and your income isn't that great, then stuff you were able to buy, you can no longer buy. Or things that you were maybe going to buy if they got a little bit cheaper, you still are absolutely not going to buy. What DH Games could have done, which would have been really clever, is reduce the prices to better represent localized economic groups to actually encourage people who don't currently spend to begin spending. And that would actually improve their profits. Because the one thing you have to realize about DH Games' economic model for their business is it doesn't cost them any more to produce a product. Once they have made a skin in the game, or once they have gone ahead and created a new hero, that thing exists as a piece of code in the game. It doesn't matter if they sell 100 copies or 1,000 copies. It costs them pretty much the same amount of money to produce that item. So what they want is loads of people buying it. They want to make the market as wide as possible. So why not reduce the prices in different countries to get more and more and more and more people spending? Well, here's DH Games' next argument. They said that people were using VPNs to change their region to cheaper countries so they wouldn't have to spend as much in US dollars. Now, that meant that people in America were getting super great deals if, for example, they switched their location to Turkey or somewhere like that, because Turkey's economy ain't doing too great, and compared to the US dollar, they were making themselves a lot of money. But that's also because the US dollar is doing so well right now that people in America can pretty much change their region to anywhere and get a better price. But that's because the global economy is just completely all over the place right now. So first point, this is not the time to readjust your prices because the global economy has not settled. What are they going to do when prices normalize and go back to how they were, if they ever do that? DH Games aren't going to pull their prices down, are they? They're making so much more money. So you might find that prices are just going to stay the same even if the economy balances back out. The other argument is that actually people who were changing their location to these different regions were only spending because they were able to change their location to a different region. It meant that they weren't happy to spend in their current currency, so wanted a better price. If you then make that impossible for them because you've equalized your price balance, then it's likely they won't spend at all. So all they've done is, rather than trying to make someone spend the proper price for something, have instead completely lost a customer. So rather than getting 50% of the value for something, they now get 0% of the value for something because they've just alienated a customer from the market. If I was DH Games, I would go with a shut up, don't say anything approach. At the end of the day, they're spending on our game, they are generating us money. That is a good thing. So I find it very perplexing that they've gone ahead and alienated a huge chunk of the market. And I don't care if you guys say, oh, but it's not fair that people can use VPNs to change their region. Well, it's not fair, but at the same time, who cares, right? Because you can do it if you wanted to. There's tons of VPNs out there. And at the same time, these people aren't going to spend if they don't have that opportunity for them. So let them do that. Let them compete, because there's always going to be whales in the game. Let them have their fun their way, because they're still spending money and they're still supporting the game. What DH Games have failed to realize is that by shifting the prices, all they've done is push customers away. And I really hope that the number of people who currently spend on this game completely counterbalances the number of people who have decided to stop, such that DH Games go, oh, this was a really bad idea. And that's why #NoSpending is happening. It's to exaggerate this effect where people have stopped spending entirely, because what DH Games have done is alienated a massive amount of their consumer base. And by doing that, they lose customers, and losing customers means they're making less money. On the other hand, people who live in other regions like Australia have actually seen their prices come down. This is brilliant. And in my opinion, DH Games should absolutely stick with this price change. They should totally keep it where it is for those regions, because that better represents their economic position and actually makes it easier for people to spend. Remember when I was talking about localized situations? I actually think DH Games would have a really, really good time if they lowered the prices to better represent people's local areas, even though it might not be the equal value in US dollars, because that relative price is far more important than a flat US dollar value, because not every country is the same. Not every country has the same average income. Not every country has an equal balance of US dollars to another. And therefore, that inequality that we see so rampantly in this world means that market value is going to be unequal, and therefore DH Games should hire a team of specialists who can calculate the correct prices for regions to see the most spending and growth for the game. That would be an intelligent move, but unfortunately DH Games have gone with the simplified method, which is just to make the prices completely the same no matter where you are, but that results in a ton of people being unable to afford the game even though they previously were able to spend. So that's why hashtag no purchasing is happening. It's to help DH Games realize that the increase in price will alienate consumers and reduce the number of people who are willing to spend, and it will not help the game. We are not being greedy. We are not asking, or at least I certainly am not asking for a lower price. I actually think the price change in Britain is perfectly reasonable, but in some countries it is totally unreasonable for their economic baseline, right? Because people just do not make as much money as DH Games seem to think they do. And I would rather have a consumer who is spending less than other people, but still able to enjoy the game, because that's still one more person investing and spending in a product that DH Games have put their life and soul into. By removing that person, you're removing your income, and actually they're hurting their business. All because they don't like the idea of people using a different currency to get themselves better value. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I hope my argument has actually resonated with you, because localized economies are far more impactful on whether someone is willing to spend than the global economy, and considering how crazy the global economy is right now, I don't think this was the right time for DH Games to adjust the prices. It makes you wonder whether they've done this out of greed or desperation, but right now was not the time to do it. And I think, really, it was a poor business model. Just go take a look, as I said, at what Twitch did. Lowering the prices to better represent someone's localized circumstances is far more effective and will increase sales. So I'm surprised DH Games didn't do that for a company that makes millions and millions and can afford that degree of market research. It's a shame, but hey, it looks like they really did screw the pooch on this one. I personally believe that DH Games could adjust their prices on Monday after their meeting. It would be wonderful if that's what they choose to do, but I don't think they will do the right thing, and I really, really worry that these prices will stay for good. For me, as someone who lives in Britain and is paid in US dollars, that is not a problem. I can happily continue to spend. But I know for a lot of you who live in some European countries and Latin American countries and many other countries whose national average income is less than the US dollar, significantly so, I know that it's going to get harder and harder for you to spend on Idle Heroes, and even more difficult to justify the cost of living crisis that we have right now with the increased price of fuel and electricity. I hope that you guys are okay. And I hope that you don't spend more than you need to on Idle Heroes. And if you want to quit spending, I am here with you. And I am not going to spend until DH Games do something, even though I totally could afford to. Folks, hashtag no purchasing. Let's see everybody have an equal opportunity to play Idle Heroes, not just the rich few who are born in fortunate economic regions. Happy idling.